Boys, UFC 316, Dvalishvili versus O'Malley, and I don't know what has happened recently, but I think it has to do with how shit last week's card was. But I am so hyped for this pay-per-view, and maybe it's because we haven't had a decent pay-per-view in a little bit. Like UFC 315 honestly wasn't anything special. I'm looking through this card, I'm doing my predictions and shit. I'm looking through everyone on this card. I'm hyped up for this card. This card from start to finish is going to be nothing but bangers. And I think, as we move on, one of the better cards of the year. With that being said, we're going to run through this card, give you guys my rare predictions on who I think is going to win and how, starting with those early prelims, a lightweight division. Quillan Salkilld taking on Yanal, Ashmouz. Now, Quillan is a pretty well-rounded fighter with some good clean striking. He has a pretty good diverse set of strikes. He'll mix in kicks. He manages his range very well, and he doesn't just go out here headhunting. He works the body. He also has some good grappling. He'll mix in the takedowns, but sometimes he will chase the submission over position. He's also pretty aggressive striker, always moving forward, where Yanal is also a pretty well-rounded fighter. He has good fight IQ, good KO power, good grappling skills, and some submission threats here and there, but he only uses his wrestling if he's not really having that much success on the feet. And he's not really that great anywhere. Yes, he's well-rounded, but he's not that great anywhere. He's pretty strong for lightweight. He has a good chin. He can mix things up pretty well. But, his head movement isn't that great. He does get exposed against high-level strikers. He also does struggle against high-pressure fighters. I think as long as Quillan doesn't do anything stupid on the ground, because I do think Yanal is going to shoot at some point in this fight, as long as he doesn't do anything stupid on the ground, going for submission over position, I think he's going to stuff the takedowns. I think pretty late, round 1 KO for Quillan. Let's keep moving down. Also in that lightweight division, MarQuel Mederos taking on MarQuel. Now, MarQuel is a pretty powerful and technical striker. He does have some good fight IQ here and there. He has some good composure under pressure. He's pretty durable. He's durable to go, the entire distance. However, his ground control and submission game is pretty unproven at this point. Plus, he can be hit in some of these exchanges, where Mark is a pretty strong wrestler with some good submission threats. He's a pretty fast starter, and he's currently undefeated right now, making a short notice UFC debut. He also has a pretty limited experience against top tier competition, as well as he doesn't really have any real KO power, and is pretty limited to striking in general, as well as the cardio levels are pretty much unknown. Mark will start fast in this fight. I think he's going to get things going pretty quickly here. And, the reason why I am, at the end of the day, going to pick Mark over MarQuel is because MarQuel was literally too sick to fight last week. So they moved him up to this fight, which makes no sense. How can 7 days notice plus a back-to-back weight? I don't even know if he weight cutted, but he was trying to make weight at that point. I just don't think he's going to be ready for a fight. I don't like the background behind this. Too sick to fight last week, but he's good enough to fight this week. I'm going 29-28 for Mark. Let's go down to that featherweight division. Jeka Serghei taking on Serghei. Now, Jeka is one of these explosive and dynamic strikers with good KO power. He has, some good striking accuracy and volume, but his ground game and grappling in general is pretty bad. And, his submission defense also pretty bad. He does struggle against high-pressure fighters. And he also doesn't have the most experience against high-level competition. Where Serghei is a undefeated fighter. He's fairly well-rounded. He has good striking, decent KO power, good ground game, good submission skills. I think, this is a very significant step up for Serghei. Although, yes, it's a huge step up, Jeka really is only a lucky Hail Mary strike to win type of fighter. I think Serghei is good enough to not get caught by one of Jeka's sloppy shots. I think Jeka, somewhere in this fight, is going to overthrow one of his shots. Serghei is going to get that back. I'm thinking he's getting a submission here. I'm going late round 2 submission. Let's move down. Women's flyweight division. Da Silva taking on Wang Cong. Da Silva is a dynamic striker with a aggressive stand-up style who also has some decent submission game, but she has also fought a lot of high-level fighters in her career. However, she's been KO'd a lot, and a lot for a woman, which is very concerning because typically, women, especially in that flyweight division, don't have the power to get KOs out here. So the fact that she's getting KO'd multiple times is very concerning, as well as she tends to engage into brawls and doesn't have, the best fight IQ. And she's been a little bit of a decision merchant recently, where Cong is a, former professional kickboxer who got fraud checked in one of her last fights, where she lost by submission after being dropped. But She didn't take her opponent seriously. That's what I think, at least. When she is locked in, she has some next level striking. She's really good. Power, speed, the takedown defense, all of that. I think, to be honest, the stand-up for both these two is going to be very, very competitive for about the first 2 minutes. But then the power of Cong is just going to make Silva have way too much respect for her on the feet. 30-27 decision win for Wang Cong. Maybe dropping Del Silva here and there, but Del Silva's pretty good on the feet for her own rise. Let's go down to the prelims now. Welterweight division. Chaos Williams taking on Andres Gustafsson. Now, Williams is one of these fan-friendly fighters who is good at walking people down, throwing a ton of power, mixing up the head, body, some low kicks. He has solid takedown defense, and he's very durable. He can literally KO you at any point in the fight, where Gustafsson is a good grappler with solid wrestling, some good power in his strikes, and he will be constantly using his pressure to back you up against the cage, look for the clinch. He's 6'1" with a 74-inch reach. He's good at using that reach, plus his fight IQ is pretty good as well. He has some nasty elbows in the clinch. He's always out here trying to get that finish, and it seems like if he can't get the finish, he tends to lose a decision. As well as he tends to struggle against wrestlers and is pretty much unproven, in the UFC. I think, Andreas has just had a double weight cut. He was supposed to fight last week. He pretty much cut weight for that fight. Double weight cut for Andreas. This is also a big jump up in competition for him. I don't like all the stuff I just said. The double weight cut, the huge jump up in competition. I think late round 2, Andreas is going to be pretty gassed. I'm going round 2 KO, late round 2 KO for Chaos Williams after Andreas is pretty gassed. Let's go down to the heavyweight division. Serghei, Spivac, Waldo, Cortes, Acosta. Spivac is one of these wrestlers with, a good ground game, good ground and pound skills, okay submissions, but he can be very sloppy on the feet, and on the ground he has trouble controlling his opponents, and his striking garbage pretty much, where Acosta is a fun striker who is fairly tough, has some good power for the division. He has a decent chin. He has a blue belt in BJJ, so he does have some groundwork here. I wasn't, the biggest fan of him when he fought Arlovsky, but he has been, getting better and better, growing on me a little bit more here and there. I think, the only people that are losing to Serghei Spivac are going to be the heavyweights that are borderline obese, that have zero skill, and I don't think Acosta is one of those fighters. I think Acosta is better than most of these obese heavyweights, and I think the speed alone is going to be too much for Serghei Spivac. Round 2, early round 2 KO, Waldo, Cortes, Acosta. Light heavyweight division, Benson Ribeiro taking on Asmat Mirzakhanov. Now, Ribeiro is one of these offensive strikers with a decent, grappling skill set. He doesn't have the best striking in the world either. The striking defense, not that great. I'm not going to lie, pretty garbage. Where Mirzakhanov is a well-rounded fighter. He has very good KO power for this division. Good dynamic strikes, good takedown defense, strong grappling skills, and is currently undefeated and he's a very fast starter for this division. With a good fight IQ, he does have a pretty limited amount of experience against top tier competition, but because of his fast style, there are some concerns about, cardio. There's concerns about, the striking defense as a whole. And not only that, against other light heavyweights, he's kind of small for the division. I think the speed, the power, everything that I just listed, I just think Asmat is just better all around and should find the KO here. I'm going to go first round KO. I was thinking more of that second round, but, this dude is a fast starter. First round KO. Let's move down. Flyweight division. This is a banger. I can't wait for this fight. Bruno Silva, Joshua Van. And to be honest, I don't think there's been a single stinker on this card so far. Everyone that I just listed are going to be a fun fight. This one, one of my most anticipated fights. Bruno Silva is a aggressive, powerful striker, always on that front foot with a strong clinch game, good short hooks, and his grappling pretty limited. He can struggle with his takedown defense, but on the feet, he's one of the more powerful strikers in this division. Where Joshua Van, 23 years old. He's a aggressive prospect with some great striking. He has a good pace. He's always improving from fight to fight, and he does have some decent takedowns. His scrambles are pretty good as well, but it could be better. His aggressive style can leave him pretty wide open for counters like we saw against some of his other fights, like when he got knocked out. But Van has just been getting better and better after every single fight. But again, his chin is a little bit worn, especially when he's going against one of the hardest hitters in this division. I think he still gets it done. I think it's going to be a war, 29-28 decision win, Joshua Van. I think Bruno Silva is just going to be a little bit too sloppy out here, where Van is going to be way more textbook and precise. Let's get into this main card now. Welterweight division. Vicente Luque, Kevin Holland. Luque, one of these well-rounded fighters with a pretty aggressive style. You know, he has good KO power, a strong submission game, high pressure, good clinch work, lots of high-level opponents on his resume. If he loses or wins against them, they're still on his resume. He can absorb a lot of significant strikes though. And because of his, limited head movement, this dude gets hit way too much for my liking. Plus, he's been very inconsistent recently. Kevin Holland, a fan-friendly fighter because of his fighting style and the ability to put on a show for every single one of his fights, but he can also be very annoying to watch just because that fight IQ, it's the fight IQ / that ego, not wanting to take shit seriously, but he's pretty well-rounded. He struggles against, we know he struggles against the takedown. He has accurate, powerful striking, and his takedown defense, again, the biggest hole in his game, but I feel, am I the only one here that feels like at 170, Kevin Holland cares just a little bit more and is kind of taking shit a little bit more serious? I've heard him in some podcasts. I've heard him in some interviews. It sounds like this dude is locking in. And if Kevin Holland locks in at this fight, he should get that KO in here. I'm going round 2 KO. 170 locked in Kevin Holland is a threat at 170. I'm not going to lie. But let's go down to the bantamweight division. Mario Bautista, Patchy mix. Now, Bautista, a well-rounded fighter, the black belt in BJJ, currently, the UFC's most hated fighter, and for a good reason. He had it all because of that fight with Waldo. Let's be realistic. He has a good submission game, good fight IQ, but really lacks any KO power and, one of the worst styles in the UFC, and that's why he's the most hated fighter currently, because he just likes to use his clinch game to stall pretty much. But yeah, the most hated fighter on the roster right now, taking on Patchy Mix. Mix is a elite submission grappler with some good control, good position on the ground. He is good at dictating the pace of the fight, using his reach to keep it at his fight. However, his striking is pretty bad, and if you can neutralize his grappling, he's pretty much a fish out of water. He's making his UFC debut. He has a pretty limited experience against any top tier competition in the UFC because, like I said, it is his debut, but in my opinion, this shit's almost like a 50-50 type of fight, and if Bautista can stop the takedowns, Mario's going to run away with this fight easy. I think there's going to be lots of submission threats. I think Patchy Mitch is going to be the one threatening these submissions. I think on the feet, I don't know if we're going to see much action on the feet, to be honest. I think this is going to be a ground war, and I think there's going to be lots of submission threats. I don't see any of them getting in. 29-28 decision win, Patchy Mix getting a good win in his debut. I don't see either one of these dudes getting finished. I could see Patchy. I don't see either of these dudes getting finished, to be honest. But let's get into this featured fight. Middleweight division, Kevin Gastelum, Joe Pyfer. Now, this fight has already been booked before. I already ran through my prediction on it, but my prediction hasn't changed, where Kevin Gastelum, one of these what-if fighters, and because he could have been champ. Let's be realistic. He could have been champ, but he's a waste of talent out here. He's a great Division 1 wrestler with a good chin, okay power. He can mix shit up pretty well, but he doesn't have any work ethic. Where Pyfer, a pressure-heavy fighter with some crazy power for the division, as well as decent BJJ, good volume. His striking defense is pretty ass, I'm not gonna lie, as well as his takedown defense, Cardio, isn't, it does seem like he does tend to fade as the fight goes on. Now, Kevin Gastelum's big old Mexican head is going to hold up, and he's going to put that pace on Pyfer. And he's going to gas out Joe Pyfer. 3rd round TKO win over a gassed Joe Pyfer. Kevin Gastelum gained that win. And, again, I'm banking on that big old Mexican head to to withstand some of these, Ngannou level strikes that are going to be coming his way. But let's move down to that co-main event, women's bantamweight division, title on the line. Julianna Peña, Kayla Harrison. Julianna Peña is a high-pressure fighter, high-pressure grappler, with a strong, positional control and decent ground and pound, nothing, it's okay. She has good top control, and she has a decent, submission game, good cardio, very strong, never give up mentality. She can get dropped countless times from Amanda Nunes and keep moving forward. But she can be a little bit retarded and overcommit to takedowns, to strikes, which does tend to have a submission threat here, or she can be countered very easily. Her striking in general, terrible. Her defense, just as bad. Kayla Harrison, on the other hand, a two-time Olympic gold medal in judo with elite grappling and takedown skills. She's honestly like a mini Hulk out there with some crazy physical strength and athleticism. She often just overpowers her opponents, to be honest, using her just brute strength. But she is dangerous from, KOs to submissions. She has good cardio, good fight IQ. Her striking, not the best, and the KOs typically happen from ground and pound. But again, against high-level opponents, she has been struggling. She hasn't been as dominant, but I think we're gonna see a nasty finish here. I think Kayla Harrison's getting Julianna Peña down. I think she's getting to full mount and landing some of the nastiest, elbows that we've seen in the UFC. I'm going round 2, nasty ground and pound TKO win for Kayla Harrison and getting that Amanda Nunes fight next. Let's keep moving down. Bantamweight division, belt on the line. Merab Dvalishvili, Sean O'Malley, the rematch now. Merab, we already know both these dudes, to be honest, but Merab, well-rounded fighter, crazy takedown volume, and good strong wrestling. He uses his pressure-heavy, wrestling style to overwhelm his opponents over 5 rounds, and his non-stop pace. It never seems like this dude's tired at all at the end of the fight. He has good ground control and is very durable. He uses his non-stop takedowns to tire his opponents. He's not really trying to land a takedown. More, he's just trying to tire the shit out of his opponents, where it doesn't seem, to be honest, it doesn't seem he has many threats when it comes to finishing a fight. No real power, no real submission threats, as well as it's literally the exact same predictable game plan every single fight. With that being said, that game plan is fucking overpowered. But Sean O'Malley, one of, the best strikers, not in the division, but in the sport in general. He has good KO power for the division, crazy timing, crazy accuracy, some good distance control, diverse set of strikes, which he was lacking in the last fight. He didn't want to throw. He has good footwork, good fight IQ, composure. His grappling in general is pretty weak. He can freeze up at times if he's on the back foot too much with low output. I think we're going to see a completely different fight here. I think Sean, it all comes down to the first round. We'll see in the first round who's winning this fight. If Sean throws some punches and some kicks and, is active, he's winning that fight and he's finding the chin. But if we see the exact same Sean O'Malley who is, scared to throw, he doesn't want to overextend, he's scared to use his kicks, his kicks are some of his best weapons, which he completely didn't use until, the 5th round, which was one of the better rounds he had. If we see a more active Sean O'Malley, he's winning this fight and he's finding that chin. I don't know if he can, win a decision against Merab. Maybe. I'm going round 3 KO though. I think Sean O'Malley finds that chin. At first, I thought Merab was going to go out here and stink it up. That was my original prediction. But looking at this more, I know I've been saying it for a while. Sean's getting that belt back. I'm going round 3 KO. I think it's going to be a very controversial stoppage. And yeah, I think it's going to be very controversial. With that being said, let me know in the comments below, what do you guys think? Tomorrow, I am going to drop my rare locks of UFC 316. So if you have any of your own, let me know what your rare locks are for UFC 316. And yeah, with that being said, thank you for watching to the end of the video. And I will see you guys in my next video.